You have grand visions and burning ambition, yet you find yourself starting projects you never finish and making plans you never execute. Every day you feel the fire of what you could accomplish, but somehow your actions never match your aspirations, leaving you frustrated and wondering if you're destined to remain a dreamer rather than an achiever. I am Napoleon Bonaparte, and I rose from a minor Corsican artillery officer to Emperor of the French by mastering the marriage between boundless ambition and iron discipline. What I discovered about channeling ambition through discipline will transform you from someone who merely dreams of greatness into someone who seizes it with both hands. The same principles that allowed me to conquer most of Europe, while others talked about conquest, can help you conquer your own inconsistency and finally achieve what your ambition has always promised. Whether you're building an empire or building a career, the fundamentals of turning vision into victory remain unchanged. But first, like this video, subscribe for more imperial wisdom, and comment your location below. I want to see which corners of the world are ready to transform ambition into achievement. I was born into ambition on the rocky island of Corsica, but ambition without direction is merely noise. As a child, I dreamed of greatness, while my mind scattered like leaves in the Mediterranean wind. I would start grand projects, building elaborate sand fortifications, organizing neighborhood children into armies, planning expeditions, only to abandon them when the next exciting idea captured my imagination. My father Charles wanted me to become a lawyer, a respectable profession, for a minor nobleman's son, but I burned with visions of military glory, of conquering lands and commanding respect. Yet for all my grand dreams, I was undisciplined. I would read military histories voraciously for days, then abandon my studies for weeks. I would train intensively with my sword, then neglect practice when other interests beckoned. The turning point came when I was sent to the Royal Military School at Brienne-le-Château at age 9. Here, surrounded by the sons of French nobility who looked down upon my Corsican accent and modest background, I discovered something that would change everything: the power of systematic discipline as a weapon against disadvantage. At Brienne, I faced a choice that every ambitious person must face. I could continue being a dreamer who talked about greatness while achieving mediocrity, or I could submit my wild ambitions to the forge of daily discipline. The French boys had advantages of birth and wealth I would never possess, but I realized they lacked something I could develop: the iron will to outwork and outthink them systematically. I began with my studies. Instead of random bursts of reading, I created a schedule: mathematics before dawn, military history after morning drill, geography during meal breaks. While other boys played or gossiped, I mapped out every hour of my day. Not because I enjoyed structure, I craved freedom and spontaneity, but because I understood that discipline was the price of genuine freedom. The breakthrough came during a winter siege game where students defended and attacked snow fortifications. While others rushed into battle with enthusiasm but no plan, I spent hours drawing detailed siege strategies, calculating angles of attack, organizing my forces with military precision. When the battle began, my systematically prepared team achieved total victory against boys who had superior numbers but inferior preparation. That victory taught me the fundamental truth that would guide my entire life: ambition without discipline is merely wishful thinking, but disciplined ambition becomes unstoppable force. The boy who dreams of conquest but cannot organize his study schedule will never organize armies. The person who cannot discipline themselves in small things will never achieve great things. From that moment, I transformed my relationship with discipline. Instead of seeing it as restriction, I recognized it as liberation, the key that would unlock every door my ambition wanted to open. As a young artillery officer, I discovered that the same principles that guided cannon fire could guide human achievement. Artillery demands precision. You cannot fire randomly and hope to hit your target. Every shot requires careful calculation of distance, wind, elevation, and timing. I began applying this same methodical approach to my personal ambitions. When I arrived in Paris as a 20-year-old second lieutenant, I carried the same grand dreams that plague every ambitious young person. I wanted to write great literature, master mathematics, understand philosophy, reform society, and achieve military glory, all simultaneously. But now I had learned something crucial, the power of systematic targeting. I developed what I called my artillery method for personal achievement. Just as I would never fire a cannon without first calculating trajectory, I would never pursue an ambition without first mapping out the precise steps required. I took my grandest dreams and broke them down into monthly objectives, weekly targets, and daily actions. For example, I wanted to become the most knowledgeable military strategist in France. Instead of random reading, I created a systematic study plan. Mondays, ancient warfare, and Alexander's campaigns. Tuesdays, Roman military tactics and Caesar's innovations. Wednesdays, medieval siege warfare. Thursdays, modern artillery and fortification. Fridays, naval strategy and logistics. Saturdays, review and synthesis. Sundays, original strategic thinking and planning. This systematic approach transformed everything. While other officers spent evenings gambling or socializing, I was methodically building expertise that would serve me for life. When they complained about boring garrison duties, I used every spare moment to advance my self-designed curriculum of excellence. The breakthrough came during my first campaign in Italy. While senior officers argued about strategy, I had systematically studied every battle fought on Italian soil for the past 3 centuries. I knew the terrain, understood the logistics, and had analyzed every successful and failed campaign. When opportunity came to propose battle plans, I didn't offer vague ideas. I presented detailed, systematically researched strategies that accounted for supply lines, weather patterns, enemy capabilities, and alternative scenarios. But here's what most people miss about systematic achievement. It's not enough to have good systems. You must have the discipline to follow them even when inspiration fails, motivation wanes, or circumstances become difficult. There were countless evenings when I preferred to socialize with fellow officers rather than study military history. There were mornings when bed seemed more appealing than dawn mathematics practice. The difference between dreamers and achievers isn't the quality of their ambitions, it's their willingness to follow their systems, even when they don't feel like it. I learned to divorce my actions from my emotions, whether I felt motivated or discouraged, energetic or tired, confident or uncertain. I followed my predetermined schedule. My feelings became irrelevant to my progress. This artillery method, systematic targeting combined with disciplined execution, allowed me to accomplish in months what took others years. While they relied on inspiration and mood, I relied on method and consistency. While they made progress when conditions were perfect, I made progress regardless of conditions. The ambitious person who masters this principle becomes dangerous to the status quo because they stop being dependent on external circumstances for internal progress. There comes a moment in every ambitious person's life when all the planning and preparation must transform into decisive action. I learned this lesson on the 18th of Brumaire, when I seized power in France through a carefully orchestrated coup. But the real lesson wasn't in the planning. It was in the split-second decision to act when the moment arrived. For months, I had systematically prepared for political opportunity. I studied the weaknesses of the Directory government, cultivated relationships with key political figures, and positioned myself as the military leader France needed. But preparation alone never conquered anything. The moment of truth came when I had to choose between safety and destiny. Most ambitious people fail not because they lack vision or even discipline, but because they cannot pull the trigger when opportunity presents itself. They suffer from what I call paralysis by preparation. They plan endlessly but never act decisively. They wait for perfect conditions that never come, for certainty that doesn't exist, for guarantees that life never provides. I discovered that decisive action requires a different kind of discipline than systematic preparation. It requires the discipline to act with incomplete information, to commit fully despite uncertainty, and to accept responsibility for outcomes beyond your control. This is perhaps the hardest discipline of all, because it demands that you risk everything you've built on the possibility of what you might become. The secret, I learned, is that timing beats perfection every time. A good plan executed immediately will defeat a perfect plan executed too late. When I saw the political chaos in Paris, when I recognized that France needed strong leadership, when I realized the Directory was crumbling, I acted, not because conditions were perfect, but because delay would mean losing the opportunity forever. But here's what separates true leaders from mere dreamers. I had systematically prepared for the moment when decisive action would be required. I had studied every successful political transition in history. I had identified the key players who would need to support such a move. I had considered multiple scenarios and planned responses to likely obstacles. When the moment came, I didn't have to think. I simply executed what I had already systematically prepared. This is the discipline of decisive action, systematic preparation, combined with bold execution when opportunity presents itself. Most people prepare endlessly but never act. Others act impulsively without preparation. True achievers do both. They prepare systematically and act decisively. I've observed that ambitious people often struggle with this balance. They become so comfortable in the preparation phase, so safe in the planning stage, that they resist the vulnerability required for action. But ambition without action is merely intellectual exercise. All the knowledge, all the planning, all the systematic preparation becomes worthless if you cannot pull the trigger when the moment arrives. The discipline of decisive action also requires accepting that you will make decisions with incomplete information. I never had perfect intelligence about enemy positions, never knew with certainty how political allies would react, never possessed complete understanding of complex situations, but I learned to act on the best information available rather than waiting for perfect clarity. This principle transforms how you approach opportunity. Instead of waiting until you feel ready, which never happens, you prepare systematically and then act when circumstances align. Instead of seeking guarantees, which don't exist, you build competence and then trust your preparation when the moment demands commitment. When I became Emperor of the French, I faced a challenge that destroys most ambitious people: how to maintain personal discipline while managing unlimited power and responsibility. The temptation to abandon structure in favor of imperial whims is overwhelming. Yet I discovered that the higher you rise, the more crucial systematic habits become. My daily routine as emperor was more rigid than my schedule as a struggling artillery officer. I rose at 7 every morning, regardless of when I had gone to bed, regardless of what crisis demanded attention, regardless of my mood or energy level. This wasn't arbitrary, it was strategic. The man who cannot control his morning cannot control his empire. After rising, I spent exactly 1 hour in personal preparation, reviewing dispatches that arrived overnight, planning the day's priorities, and engaging in what I called Emperor's Meditation, a systematic review of ongoing challenges and opportunities across the empire. This hour belonged to me alone, free from advisors, interruptions, or external demands. From 8 to 9, I met with my private secretary to organize correspondence and schedule meetings. Every letter was categorized: urgent military matters, administrative decisions requiring imperial approval, diplomatic communications, and personal correspondence. I learned that without systematic organization, important matters get buried under urgent trivialities. 9 to 12 was dedicated to military affairs and strategic planning. Whether we were at peace or war, I spent these 3 hours on systematic analysis of France's military position, review of troop movements, evaluation of potential threats, and long-term strategic planning. This wasn't just about immediate needs, it was about building sustainable military superiority. Lunch was precisely at noon and lasted exactly 1 hour. I ate the same simple meal, usually soup, meat, and vegetables, not because I lacked imagination, but because decision fatigue is real. Every trivial choice you make depletes energy for important decisions. By systematizing the small things, I preserved mental energy for the big things. Afternoons from 1 to 4 were reserved for administrative governance, reviewing laws, meeting with ministers, making domestic policy decisions, and handling the 1,000 details that keep an empire functioning. I discovered that systematic attention to administrative details prevents small problems from becoming catastrophic crises. 4 to 6 belong to diplomatic affairs and foreign policy. Every ambassador, every treaty, every international relationship required careful attention. I learned that empires fall more often from diplomatic neglect than military defeat. Systematic attention to foreign relations prevented more wars than armies ever won. Evenings were for personal time, but even this was structured. Dinner at 7, followed by time with family or trusted friends, then reading until 10. I read systematically: history on Mondays, philosophy on Tuesdays, literature on Wednesdays, scientific works on Thursdays, military studies on Fridays, religious texts on Saturdays, and contemporary political writings on Sundays. But here's what most people misunderstand about systematic routines. They're not restrictions on freedom. They're the foundation that makes freedom possible. Because I followed this structure religiously, I could handle unexpected crises without losing control of ongoing responsibilities. When urgent matters demanded attention, I could adjust without abandoning the systematic approach that kept the empire functioning. The discipline of routine also created predictability for others. My staff knew when I would be available for different types of decisions. Foreign ambassadors understood when to request audiences. Military commanders knew when to expect strategic guidance. This predictability multiplied my effectiveness because others could plan around my schedule rather than constantly seeking access. Most ambitious people resist routine because they associate it with limitation. But I discovered the opposite. Systematic daily habits create the stability necessary for extraordinary achievement. At the Battle of Austerlitz, I faced the combined armies of Austria and Russia, forces that outnumbered my troops and possessed every apparent advantage. Yet I achieved what military historians still call the perfect victory. The secret wasn't superior numbers or better equipment. It was the discipline of absolute concentration on a single decisive objective. For weeks before the battle, while my enemies dispersed their attention across multiple strategic concerns, I focused everything on one goal: forcing them to attack me on ground of my choosing at a time that favored my forces. Every decision, every troop movement, every piece of intelligence gathering served this single purpose. I said no to dozens of good tactical opportunities because they didn't advance this central objective. This is perhaps the most difficult discipline for ambitious people to master: the discipline of concentrated focus. We live in a world that rewards the appearance of being busy with many important things. We confuse activity with achievement, motion with progress. But I learned that the man who pursues 10 objectives achieves none, while the man who pursues one objective with total concentration achieves the impossible. In my early campaigns in Italy, I discovered what I called the principle of decisive concentration. Instead of trying to win on every front simultaneously, I identified the single point where victory would collapse the entire enemy position. Then I concentrated overwhelming force at that precise point while accepting weakness everywhere else. This violated conventional military wisdom, which emphasized balanced strength across all positions. But concentration requires saying no to opportunities that seem attractive but dilute your primary focus. During the Italian campaigns, I received multiple offers to expand operations into other regions, to pursue additional strategic objectives, to capitalize on secondary opportunities. Each looked promising in isolation, but I had learned that pursuing multiple objectives simultaneously guarantees mediocre results in all areas. The discipline of concentration extends beyond military strategy to personal achievement. When I decided to master artillery science, I concentrated exclusively on that objective for 18 months. I didn't also try to become an expert in cavalry tactics, naval warfare, and engineering simultaneously. I focused entirely on artillery until I became the most knowledgeable artillery officer in the French army. Only then did I systematically move to the next area of expertise. Most ambitious people scatter their efforts across too many simultaneous pursuits. They want to build a business and write a novel, and learn 3 languages and master public speaking, and develop their artistic talents all at the same time. This approach guarantees they will achieve nothing significant in any area. I learned to think in terms of sequential mastery rather than simultaneous pursuit. Master one thing completely, then use that mastery as a foundation for the next challenge. Each achievement becomes a platform for greater achievement, but only if you resist the temptation to pursue everything at once. Concentration also requires eliminating distractions ruthlessly. During critical planning periods, I would disappear from social obligations, ignore non-essential correspondence, and delegate everything that didn't directly advance the primary objective. This appeared antisocial to some, but it was strategically essential. The general who allows his attention to be scattered by urgent trivialities will lose to the general who maintains focus on decisive priorities. The modern world makes concentration more difficult but more valuable than ever. Everyone around you will have scattered attention, will be pursuing multiple objectives simultaneously, will be constantly distracted by the urgent at the expense of the important. This creates enormous opportunity for the person who masters the discipline of focused concentration. When you concentrate all your energy, resources, and attention on a single objective, you don't just increase your chances of success, you make yourself formidable in ways that dispersed effort never achieves. In need. 1814, I faced the ultimate test of disciplined character when coalition forces entered Paris and forced my abdication. After conquering most of Europe, I found myself exiled to the tiny island of Elba, stripped of empire, armies, and apparent future. This moment would either destroy me or reveal whether my disciplines were deep enough to survive total defeat. Most ambitious people measure their discipline only during periods of success and progress. But true discipline reveals itself in how you respond when everything falls apart, when your grand plans collapse, when external circumstances strip away everything you've built. These moments separate those who possess authentic inner strength from those who merely benefited from favorable conditions. During my exile on Elba, I could have surrendered to despair, bitterness, or resignation. Instead, I applied the same systematic approach to defeat that I had used for victory. I analyzed what had gone wrong, identified lessons from the failure, and began systematically preparing for the next opportunity. I didn't know if such an opportunity would come, but I prepared as if it were inevitable. I spent my days on Elba studying maps of Europe, analyzing the political situation developing in France, maintaining correspondence with supporters, and most importantly, designing improved strategies based on lessons learned from defeat. Instead of dwelling on what I had lost, I focused systematically on what I could still control: my knowledge, my preparation, and my readiness for future opportunity. The discipline of constructive response to setbacks begins with accepting responsibility. Without accepting defeat, I could have blamed treacherous allies, impossible circumstances, or unfair enemies for my downfall. All of these contained elements of truth. But blame, however justified, is the enemy of future success. I learned to extract lessons from failure without drowning in self-pity or resentment. When opportunity came, when political chaos in France created the possibility of return, I was ready. Not because I had been lucky, but because I had spent my exile in systematic preparation rather than bitter reflection. The 100 Days campaign that followed proved that defeat is only permanent if you allow it to be. But here's the crucial insight about setbacks. They reveal whether your ambition is built on external circumstances or internal character. If your sense of possibility depends on perfect conditions, supportive environments, and favorable circumstances, then any significant setback will destroy your momentum permanently. But if your ambition is rooted in systematic disciplines that transcend circumstances, then setbacks become opportunities for stronger comeback. I learned to view setbacks as intelligence gathering rather than final verdicts. Each failure provided data about what doesn't work, revealed weaknesses in my approach, and identified areas requiring stronger preparation. Instead of seeing setbacks as evidence that success was impossible, I treated them as evidence that my current methods needed improvement. The disciplined response to setbacks follows a systematic process. First, honest analysis of what went wrong without defensive rationalization. Second, identification of specific lessons and needed improvements. Third, systematic implementation of those improvements. Fourth, preparation for the next opportunity, as if it were certain to come. This approach transforms your relationship with failure from enemy to teacher. Most people avoid risks because they fear setbacks. But when you develop systematic methods for turning setbacks into comebacks, you become willing to take bigger risks because you know that even failure will advance your ultimate objectives. Victoire, ambitious person who masters this discipline becomes nearly unstoppable because they stop fearing temporary defeat and start using it as fuel for stronger future success. When I created the Napoleonic Code, I wasn't just organizing French law, I was establishing principles that would outlast empires and guide societies long after my death. But before I could codify laws for a nation, I had to develop an even more important code, the personal standards that would govern my own behavior regardless of circumstances, temptations, or conveniences. Every person who achieves lasting greatness operates according to an internal code of excellence, a set of non-negotiable principles that guide decisions when no one is watching, when taking shortcuts would be easy, when maintaining standards requires sacrifice. Without such a code, ambition becomes merely opportunism, and achievement becomes accidental rather than systematic. My personal code began with a simple principle. I would never ask others to meet standards I hadn't first demanded of myself. Before expecting soldiers to march 20 miles in a day, I proved I could do it. Before requiring officers to master military theory, I demonstrated superior knowledge myself. Before demanding loyalty from subordinates, I showed unwavering commitment to their welfare and success. This principle of personal example became the foundation for everything else. I discovered that people will follow leaders who embody the standards they espouse, but they will abandon leaders who demand excellence from others while excusing mediocrity from themselves. The gap between what you expect from others and what you demand from yourself determines whether you inspire respect or contempt. The second element of my code was consistency, regardless of circumstances. I maintained the same standards of behavior, whether addressing common soldiers or foreign emperors, whether facing victory or defeat, whether operating under observation or in complete privacy. This consistency wasn't about rigidity. It was about reliability. People could predict how I would respond because my principles were more powerful than my moods. I learned that excellence is not an act, but a habit. You cannot perform excellently in important moments if you practice mediocrity in unimportant moments. The general who accepts sloppy staff work in peacetime will receive sloppy intelligence during war. the leader who tolerates poor communication. In minor matters will face miscommunication during crises. My code also demanded continuous improvement in areas where I was already strong. After becoming the most successful general in Europe, I continued studying military history and strategy. After mastering French politics, I kept learning about governance and administration. Excellence that stops growing becomes mediocrity through stagnation. But here's where most ambitious people fail in developing their personal code. They create standards they cannot maintain under pressure. They design perfect principles for perfect conditions. Real excellence requires standards that work when you're tired, stressed, angry, disappointed, or tempted. Your code must be sustainable under the worst circumstances you're likely to face. I also learned that a personal code must include principles for handling both success and failure. Success tests character differently than failure, but no less rigorously. The standards that guide you during struggle must also guide you during triumph. Power reveals character just as clearly as adversity does. The most important element of my code was taking full responsibility for outcomes while refusing to accept credit that belonged to others. When campaigns succeeded, I publicly praised the officers and soldiers who executed the plans. When campaigns failed, I accepted complete responsibility regardless of contributing factors beyond my control. This principle built trust that became more valuable than any tactical advantage. Your personal code becomes your reputation over time. People observe the gap between your stated principles and your actual behavior. They notice whether you maintain standards when it's convenient or when it's costly. They watch whether you apply the same rules to yourself that you apply to others. This consistency, or lack thereof, determines whether others view you as someone worth following, trusting, and supporting. The disciplined development and maintenance of a personal code of excellence transforms ambition from selfish pursuit into principled achievement. When I transformed France from a revolutionary chaos into the most powerful empire in Europe, I didn't achieve this through single dramatic actions. I achieved it through systematic accumulation of small advantages that compounded over time into overwhelming superiority. This principle of compound growth separates those who achieve temporary success from those who build lasting dominance. Most ambitious people expect linear progress. They invest effort and expect proportional returns immediately. But true power follows compound principles. Small, consistent improvements accumulate invisible strength until suddenly they manifest as dramatic breakthroughs that appear miraculous to outside observers, but were inevitable results of systematic growth. In my early military career, I dedicated 1 hour each morning to studying tactics and strategy. This seemed insignificant compared to officers who relied on natural talent or formal training, but after 5 years, I had accumulated over 800 hours of systematic study, while they had accumulated experience without reflection. When opportunities for advancement came, the gap in knowledge was decisive. The power of compound growth lies in consistency over intensity. I learned that studying military history for 1 hour every day for a year produces far better results than studying intensively for 10 hours once per month. The daily habit creates momentum, builds neural pathways, and allows each day's learning to build upon previous knowledge. Sporadic intensity, however passionate, lacks the cumulative power of systematic consistency. This principle applied to every aspect of empire building. I didn't transform French administration overnight. Instead, I implemented small, systematic improvements daily: better communication systems, more efficient tax collection, streamlined legal procedures, improved military logistics. Each improvement was modest in isolation, but transformative in combination. The challenge with compound growth is that early results appear insignificant. For months or even years, your systematic efforts produce minimal, visible progress. This is where most ambitious people quit. They abandon systematic approaches because immediate results don't match their investment, but compound growth requires patience combined with faith in the process. I discovered that compound growth accelerates dramatically once it reaches critical mass. The first year of systematic improvement might produce 10% better results. The second year builds on that improvement to achieve 20% growth. The third year might produce 40% improvement over the original baseline. By the fifth year, you're operating at levels that seem impossible to those still thinking in linear terms. This acceleration principle explains why some people seem to suddenly emerge as overnight successes after years of apparent struggle. They weren't suddenly lucky. They had been systematically accumulating advantages that finally reached critical mass where compound growth became visible to external observers. The key to implementing compound growth strategies is identifying the small daily actions that will accumulate into significant advantages over time. Reading 30 minutes daily seems trivial, but it accumulates into 50 books per year and enormous knowledge advantages. Writing one page daily seems insignificant, but it produces a substantial manuscript annually. Exercising 20 minutes daily appears modest, but it creates dramatic fitness improvements over months. But compound growth requires protecting your accumulating advantages from interruption. Missing one day of systematic effort seems harmless, but it breaks momentum and reduces the compounding effect. I learned to treat my daily disciplines as non-negotiable commitments because I understood that consistency was more valuable than intensity. The most powerful aspect of compound growth is that it creates momentum, independent of motivation. When you've established systematic habits that run automatically, you continue progressing even during periods of low motivation, discouragement, or external challenges. Your habits carry you forward when your emotions would hold you back. This momentum eventually reaches a point where maintaining excellence requires less effort than achieving it originally required. The habits that were once difficult become automatic. The knowledge that was once overwhelming becomes intuitive. The skills that once demanded conscious attention become unconscious competence. During the campaign of 1805, I maintained peak mental and physical performance for 6 months of nearly continuous warfare while managing an empire, directing multiple armies, and orchestrating diplomatic negotiations simultaneously. This wasn't superhuman endurance, it was systematic energy management based on understanding that energy and attention are finite resources that must be allocated as carefully as military supplies. Most ambitious people fail not because they lack vision or even discipline, but because they squander their energy and attention on activities that drain rather than sustain their capacity for achievement. They operate like generals who deploy their best troops for minor skirmishes, leaving nothing in reserve for decisive battles. I learned that energy comes in different forms and must be managed accordingly. Physical energy powers your body through demanding tasks and long days. Mental energy fuels concentration, decision-making, and creative problem-solving. Emotional energy sustains motivation, resilience, and interpersonal effectiveness. Each type of energy has different sources, different depletion patterns, and different restoration requirements. Physical energy management became crucial when I realized that fatigue impairs judgment more than any external enemy. I maintained strict sleep discipline even during campaigns, understanding that 4 hours of quality sleep outperformed 8 hours of restless anxiety. I ate simple, consistent meals that provided sustained energy rather than dramatic peaks and crashes. I exercised regularly, not for recreation, but for maintaining the physical capacity that sustained everything else. But mental energy management proved even more critical. I discovered that decision-making depletes mental resources faster than any other activity. The general who makes trivial decisions all morning lacks the mental clarity for crucial strategic choices in the afternoon. This insight revolutionized how I structured my days and organized my responsibilities. I began systematizing routine decisions to preserve mental energy for important choices. My daily schedule, meal preferences, clothing selections, and standard procedures became automatic to eliminate mental energy waste on trivial matters. This wasn't rigidity, it was strategic conservation of cognitive resources for decisions that actually mattered. Attention management requires understanding that concentration is like physical strength. It can be trained, but it has limits that must be respected. I learned to work in focused blocks rather than scattered fragments. When studying military strategy, I gave it complete attention for predetermined periods rather than partial attention throughout the day. This concentrated approach accomplished more in 2 hours than scattered focus achieved in 8. I also discovered the importance of matching energy levels to task requirements. Complex strategic planning required peak mental energy, so I scheduled it for morning hours when my mind was sharpest. Administrative tasks that required attention, but not creativity, were relegated to afternoon periods when mental energy was lower but still adequate. Emotional energy management proved most challenging because it involves relationships and external circumstances beyond direct control. I learned that emotional energy drains fastest when dealing with people who demand constant reassurance, create unnecessary drama, or resist clear direction. Protecting emotional energy required setting boundaries with such individuals and structuring interactions to minimize emotional exhaustion. Recovery became as systematically planned as work itself. I scheduled specific periods for physical restoration, mental refreshment, and emotional renewal. These weren't indulgences, they were strategic investments in sustained high performance. The leader who cannot restore his energy systematically will eventually collapse under sustained pressure. But the most important insight about energy management is that different activities either drain or restore your various energy types. Some conversations leave you mentally stimulated rather than depleted. Some physical activities increase rather than reduce your energy reserves. Some challenges invigorate rather than exhaust your emotional state. Learning to distinguish between energy-draining and energy-restoring activities allows you to design days that sustain rather than deplete your capacity for achievement. This knowledge transforms how you choose activities, structure responsibilities, and allocate time. Before the Battle of Austerlitz, I spent weeks deliberately appearing weak and indecisive, while secretly positioning my forces for devastating attack. I allowed enemy commanders to believe they held overwhelming advantages while I systematically created the conditions for their destruction. This required perhaps the most difficult discipline of all, the discipline of strategic patience. Strategic. Patience is not passive waiting, it's active preparation combined with precise timing. The difference determines whether patience becomes power or paralysis. Most ambitious people struggle with timing because they confuse urgency with importance, motion with progress. They act too quickly on opportunities that require careful preparation, or they wait too long for conditions that will never be perfect. I learned that every significant achievement requires 3 phases: preparation, positioning, and execution. Strategic patience governs the transition between these phases. You must prepare thoroughly without rushing to action, position carefully without premature execution, then act decisively when conditions align. Most failures result from poor timing rather than poor planning. The temptation to act prematurely becomes strongest when you've invested significant effort in preparation. After months of planning a campaign, every day of additional waiting feels like wasted opportunity. But I discovered that premature action destroys more carefully laid plans than external opposition does. The general who attacks before his forces are properly positioned will lose to inferior enemies who wait for advantageous conditions. Strategic patience also requires distinguishing between preparation time and procrastination. True preparation involves systematic improvement of your position, acquisition of necessary resources, development of required capabilities, and creation of favorable conditions. Procrastination disguises itself as preparation, but actually avoids the vulnerability that real progress requires. During my negotiations with various European powers, I learned that strategic patience often means allowing others to reveal their intentions before committing to your own course of action. Eager negotiators show their entire hand in opening moves, leaving themselves vulnerable to those who maintain strategic reserve. Patient negotiators gather information while revealing nothing, then act from positions of superior knowledge, but strategic patience becomes dangerous when it turns into indefinite postponement. I've observed ambitious people who prepare endlessly but never reach the execution phase because they're addicted to the safety of preparation. They mistake planning for progress and use the need for more preparation to avoid the risks that achievement requires. The key to strategic patience is establishing clear criteria for action in advance, instead of waiting for perfect conditions, which never exist. You define the specific circumstances that will trigger decisive action. When those predetermined conditions emerge, you act immediately regardless of fear, uncertainty, or the temptation to prepare further. At Austerlitz, my criteria were simple. When enemy forces committed to attacking my deliberately weakened right flank, I would crush their exposed center with concentrated reserves. I didn't wait for perfect weather, complete intelligence, or absolute certainty of success. When the predetermined conditions appeared, I executed immediately and achieved decisive victory. Strategic patience also requires faith in compound preparation. The advantages you systematically accumulate during waiting periods create exponential rather than linear benefits when properly deployed. The intelligence gathered, alliances formed, resources accumulated, and positions improved during patient preparation phases determine whether your eventual action succeeds dramatically or fails completely. I learned that strategic patience tests character more rigorously than decisive action does. Action requires courage for a moment, but patience requires sustained discipline over extended periods. Maintaining focus, motivation, and systematic preparation while waiting for optimal timing demands inner strength that many ambitious people lack. The mastery of strategic patience transforms how you approach every significant opportunity. Instead of rushing toward immediate action or indefinite delay, you develop the discipline to prepare systematically while waiting for conditions that maximize your probability of success. When I created the Marshals of France, I wasn't simply rewarding loyalty or recognizing battlefield courage. I was systematically building a network of exceptional individuals whose combined capabilities far exceeded what any single leader could achieve alone. The quality of your inner circle determines the scale of achievement possible because no one builds empires in isolation. Most ambitious people underestimate the strategic importance of their closest relationships. They focus intensely on personal development while neglecting the systematic cultivation of alliances, partnerships, and mutual support networks. But I learned that individual excellence without relationship excellence limits your potential to whatever you can accomplish through solitary effort. The foundation of any powerful inner circle is mutual benefit rather than one-sided loyalty. I didn't ask men to follow me out of personal devotion. I created situations where their success required my success and vice versa. When Murat's cavalry charge contributed to our victory, his reputation enhanced my strategic position. When my planning created opportunities for Lannes to demonstrate tactical brilliance, his achievement elevated my entire command structure. Building such relationships requires systematic attention to others' ambitions and interests. Before asking anyone to support your objectives, you must understand what they hope to achieve and how your success can advance their goals. This isn't manipulation. It's enlightened mutual benefit that creates alignment more powerful than temporary arrangements based on convenience or personality. I discovered that the most valuable inner circle members possess capabilities that complement rather than duplicate your own strengths. Seeking people who think exactly like you creates an echo chamber that reinforces your biases and blind spots. I deliberately chose advisors who challenged my assumptions, specialists who knew more than I did in critical areas, and individuals whose personalities balanced my own tendencies. Davut provided systematic organization and attention to detail that balanced my tendency toward spontaneous decision-making. Talleyrand contributed diplomatic sophistication and political subtlety that complemented my direct military approach. Each relationship added capabilities to our collective effectiveness while maintaining individual areas of excellence. But building a powerful inner circle requires offering value before seeking benefit. I invested in others' development and success, long before needing their support for my own objectives. When young officers showed potential, I provided opportunities for them to prove themselves. When allies faced challenges, I offered assistance beyond immediate reciprocal advantage. This created genuine loyalty based on mutual investment rather than temporary convenience. The most critical aspect of inner circle development is maintaining high standards for character and competence. One untrustworthy or incompetent persons in key positions can undermine achievements that required years to build. I learned to evaluate potential inner circle members based on their behavior under pressure, their treatment of subordinates, and their response to both success and failure. Trust must be earned through demonstrated reliability in progressively important situations. I never gave anyone access to critical information or responsibility for essential outcomes based on potential alone. Trust grew systematically through proven performance in smaller matters before extending to larger ones. I also discovered that inner circle relationships require ongoing maintenance and development. Success changes people, and relationships that work during struggle may not survive prosperity. Regular, honest communication about changing goals, evolving challenges, and shifting dynamics prevents misunderstandings that destroy valuable alliances. The discipline of inner circle development means saying no to relationships that drain energy without providing mutual benefit. Some people seek association with successful individuals for personal advantage without offering reciprocal value. Others create unnecessary drama, demand constant attention, or undermine group effectiveness through their behavior. Your inner circle should make you more effective than you could be alone while contributing to their own advancement through association with you. When this mutual enhancement works properly, the collective achievement far exceeds what any individual member could accomplish independently. Even during my exile on St. Helena, when empire and power had been stripped away, I maintained the discipline that had sustained me throughout my rise: systematic learning. Each day I studied, analyzed, and extracted lessons from every experience, every failure, every interaction. This commitment to continuous learning had been the invisible foundation beneath all my visible achievements. Most ambitious people treat learning as preparation for achievement rather than the ongoing foundation of sustained excellence. They study intensively before major endeavors, but abandon systematic learning once they reach initial success. This approach guarantees that their early achievements become their permanent ceiling, rather than their launching platform for greater accomplishment. I discovered that systematic learning requires treating every experience as data, rather than simply living through events passively. After each battle, I conducted detailed analysis of what worked, what failed, and what could be improved. After each diplomatic negotiation, I studied which approaches produced desired outcomes and which created unintended consequences. After each administrative decision, I evaluated actual results against intended objectives. This systematic reflection transformed experience into expertise much faster than simply accumulating years of unreflective activity. The general who fights 100 battles without analyzing them remains a novice. The general who thoroughly analyzes 10 battles develops wisdom that serves him in any future conflict. But systematic learning extends far beyond your direct experiences. I maintained correspondence with scholars, scientists, artists, and leaders across Europe, not for social reasons, but for systematic exposure to different perspectives and approaches. Every conversation became an opportunity to acquire new knowledge or test existing assumptions against alternative viewpoints. Reading became my most systematic learning discipline. I read constantly but not randomly. I maintained structured exposure to military history, political philosophy, scientific developments, cultural analysis, and contemporary events. Each area of reading informed the others, creating compound knowledge that exceeded the sum of individual books studied. The key to systematic learning is creating frameworks for organizing and applying new knowledge rather than simply accumulating information. I developed methods for categorizing military tactics, diplomatic strategies, administrative approaches, and leadership principles. This systematic organization allowed rapid access to relevant knowledge when facing new challenges. I also learned to study failure more intensively than success. Success can result from favorable circumstances, good timing, or opponent mistakes that you cannot control or replicate. But failure reveals specific weaknesses in your approach, gaps in your knowledge, or flaws in your preparation that you can address systematically. My defeat in Russia taught me more about logistics, winter, warfare, and extended supply lines than all my previous victories combined. My political downfall revealed lessons about coalition management, diplomatic balance, and sustainable power that no amount of successful campaigning could have provided. These painful lessons became invaluable preparation for future challenges. Systematic learning also requires intellectual humility, the willingness to acknowledge when your current understanding is incomplete or incorrect. Pride makes learning impossible because it prevents you from recognizing areas where improvement is needed. I learned to treat my existing knowledge as provisional rather than final, always subject to revision based on new evidence or better analysis. The most powerful aspect of systematic learning is that it compounds over time in ways that create exponential rather than linear advantages. Each new piece of knowledge connects to existing frameworks, reinforcing and expanding your understanding. Complex patterns become visible that remain hidden to those with scattered or superficial knowledge. But systematic learning requires protecting time for reflection and study, even during periods of intense activity. The urgent demands of immediate challenges will always threaten to crowd out the important discipline of ongoing learning. I learned to treat study time as non-negotiable investment in future capability rather than optional activity when convenient. This commitment to systematic learning creates adaptability that transcends any specific skill or knowledge area. When facing completely new challenges, you possess the learning frameworks necessary for rapid acquisition of relevant expertise rather than dependence on existing knowledge alone. At Waterloo, with the fate of my empire hanging in the balance, and Wellington's forces arrayed against me in what would be my final battle, I faced the ultimate test of executing under maximum pressure. Every decision carried irreversible consequences. Every moment of hesitation could mean the difference between restoration and permanent exile. This was when all my years of systematic preparation would either prove their worth or reveal their inadequacy. Pressure reveals the true depth of your preparation and character in ways that comfortable circumstances never can. Anyone can maintain discipline when stakes are low, conditions are favorable, and time is abundant. But the ambitious person who cannot execute effectively under pressure will find their greatest opportunities wasted when they matter most. I learned that execution under pressure requires a completely different set of disciplines than performance in normal conditions. Pressure changes how your mind processes information, how your body responds to stress, and how your emotions affect decision-making. These changes are physiological realities that cannot be overcome through willpower alone. They must be systematically prepared for. The foundation of pressure performance is what I called automatic excellence, developing skills and procedures to such a level of mastery that they function reliably even when conscious thinking becomes compromised by stress. A cavalry charge succeeds or fails based on training that has become instinctive, not on soldiers making conscious decisions in the heat of battle. This principle guided how I prepared for high-pressure situations throughout my career. Before major battles, I didn't just plan strategy. I rehearsed potential scenarios until my responses became automatic. I practiced giving orders clearly under simulated stress. I prepared contingency plans so thoroughly that adaptation to unexpected developments required minimal conscious decision-making. But systematic preparation for pressure extends beyond technical skills to mental and emotional readiness. Pressure amplifies whatever mental habits you've developed during normal conditions. If you typically respond to challenges with anxiety and overthinking, pressure will intensify these patterns until they become paralyzing. If you've developed habits of calm analysis and systematic response, pressure will activate these patterns when you need them most. I learned to deliberately expose myself to smaller pressures as training for larger ones. Instead of avoiding stressful situations, I sought them out as opportunities to practice maintaining clarity and effectiveness when stakes were elevated. Each successfully handled pressure situation built confidence and competence for facing greater challenges. During the Italian campaigns, I noticed that my most effective decisions under pressure came not from brilliant inspiration in the moment, but from applying principles I had systematically developed during calm periods. The heat of battle was no time for creative thinking. It was time for executing well-rehearsed approaches with speed and precision. This insight revolutionized how I prepared for any high-stakes situation. Instead of hoping inspiration would strike when pressure mounted, I systematically developed decision-making frameworks that would guide me when time was short and consequences were severe. These frameworks served as mental anchors that prevented pressure from creating chaotic or impulsive responses. Breathing and physical composure became essential pressure management tools. I learned that controlled breathing could maintain mental clarity even when external circumstances triggered stress responses. Physical tension reduces cognitive performance, so I developed systematic methods for maintaining bodily calm even during intense mental focus. The most important pressure discipline is accepting that you cannot control outcomes, only your response to circumstances. Pressure intensifies when you attempt to control factors beyond your influence while neglecting areas where you do have power. At Waterloo, I could not control Wellington's tactical decisions, the terrain conditions, or the timing of Prussian reinforcements. But I could control my own strategic choices, the clarity of my communications, and the systematic execution of my battle plan. This focus on controllable factors rather than desired outcomes reduces pressure significantly while improving actual performance. When your attention is fully engaged with executing your systematic approach, rather than worrying about results, you perform closer to your true capability, even under extreme pressure. 2 centuries after my death, the legal system I created still governs much of the world. The Napoleonic Code outlasted my empire, my armies, and my personal glory, because I understood a crucial principle. Truly ambitious people don't just achieve personal success. They create systems that continue producing value long after they're gone. Most ambitious individuals focus exclusively on personal achievement and immediate results. They build careers, accumulate wealth, and gain recognition, but their impact dies with them because they never develop the discipline of systematic thinking. They optimize for today's success while neglecting tomorrow's sustainability. I learned the difference between achieving and systematizing during my transformation of French education. Instead of simply founding schools, I created an educational framework that would automatically reproduce qualified administrators, engineers, and military officers for generations. The system became more valuable than any individual institution because it solved problems permanently rather than temporarily. Creating lasting systems requires thinking beyond personal involvement and designing solutions that work independently of your direct management. This demands a completely different kind of discipline, the discipline of designing sustainability rather than just achieving efficiency. When I reorganized the French administrative system, I didn't simply appoint capable ministers and efficient procedures. I created systematic training programs for future administrators, established clear promotion criteria based on merit rather than connection, and designed feedback mechanisms that would identify and correct problems automatically. The key insight is that lasting systems must be self-improving rather than merely self-sustaining. A system that only maintains current performance will gradually decay as circumstances change and original participants are replaced. But a system designed to adapt and improve continuously becomes more valuable over time rather than less. This principle guided how I approached every major reorganization. The metric system I helped establish didn't just solve France's measurement problems, it created a framework so logical and consistent that it spread worldwide and improved global commerce permanently. The system was designed to be obviously superior to alternatives, making adoption inevitable rather than forced. But creating lasting systems requires patience and systematic thinking that most ambitious people find frustrating. Building systems demands significant upfront investment with delayed returns. It requires designing for scenarios you may never personally encounter and solving problems you may never personally face. This long-term orientation conflicts with the immediate gratification that drives many ambitious personalities. I discovered that lasting systems share certain characteristics regardless of their specific application. They must be simple enough for ordinary people to understand and implement. They must be robust enough to survive changes in leadership and circumstances. They must be beneficial enough that people want to maintain them rather than replacing them with alternatives. The discipline of systematic thinking also requires considering unintended consequences and designing safeguards against them. Every system creates incentives that shape behavior in ways you may not anticipate. The legal code that protects property rights might discourage innovation if not carefully designed. The educational system that ensures competence might stifle creativity if overly rigid. This systematic approach extends to personal achievement as well. Instead of building success that depends entirely on your continued involvement, you can create systems that generate ongoing value with minimal personal attention. The business that only succeeds when you're directly managing every decision becomes a prison rather than an asset. The organization that cannot function without your constant presence wastes the leadership investment required to build it. Creating lasting systems also requires documenting and transferring knowledge rather than hoarding it for personal advantage. The general who keeps tactical innovation secret dies with irreplaceable military knowledge. The administrator who never trains successors creates institutional fragility that a single departure can destroy. I learned to view system creation as the highest form of leadership, not just accomplishing important objectives, but building the capacity for others to accomplish similar objectives long after your direct involvement ends. This transforms temporary personal achievement into permanent institutional capability. The ultimate test of systematic thinking is whether your most important contributions would survive and continue developing if you disappeared tomorrow. True. Legacy lies not in what you personally achieved, but in what you made possible for others to achieve. During my final exile on St. Helena, when all earthly power had been stripped away and death approached, I spent my remaining years dictating memoirs and reflections not for personal vindication, but to ensure that the principles which had guided my rise would survive to guide others. This was when I fully understood the difference between success and legacy. Success serves yourself, but legacy serves the future. The legacy mindset transforms how you approach every decision, every relationship, and every opportunity. Instead of asking, "What will this achieve for me?" you begin asking, "What will this make possible for others?" This shift in perspective doesn't diminish personal ambition. It elevates ambition to serve purposes larger than immediate self-interest. Learn that legacy thinking requires accepting responsibility for consequences that extend far beyond your intended actions. When I restructured European borders, I wasn't just solving immediate political problems. I was shaping the context in which future generations would live, work, and govern themselves. Every major decision carries this weight of extended consequence, whether you acknowledge it or not. The discipline of legacy thinking begins with understanding that your most important contributions may not be your most visible achievements. My military victories captured public attention and historical notice, but my legal reforms, educational systems, and administrative innovations influenced daily life for millions of people long after the battles were forgotten. This realization changed how I allocated time and attention during my reign. Instead of focusing exclusively on dramatic campaigns that would enhance my immediate reputation, I invested systematically in institutions and systems that would benefit people I would never meet in circumstances I could never anticipate. Legacy thinking also requires accepting that others will build upon, modify, and sometimes reject your contributions. The Napoleonic Code influenced legal systems worldwide, but not in the exact form I created. Educational reforms I established were adapted to different cultures and circumstances. This evolution doesn't diminish the original contribution. It proves its lasting value by demonstrating adaptability to changing needs. But developing legacy consciousness demands confronting mortality and impermanence in ways that most ambitious people find uncomfortable. It requires acknowledging that your personal involvement in any achievement will eventually end, that your knowledge and capabilities will ultimately disappear, that your influence depends on how well you prepare others to continue what you began. This confrontation with impermanence actually liberates rather than limits ambitious action. When you understand that personal glory is temporary, but systematic contribution can be permanent, you stop hoarding opportunities and start creating them for others. You stop protecting knowledge and start transferring it. You stop building personal kingdoms and start building sustainable institutions. I discovered that legacy mindset changes how you treat people around you, especially those who might eventually surpass your achievements. Instead of viewing talented subordinates as threats to your position, you see them as potential vehicles for extending your influence beyond your personal limitations. Their success becomes evidence of your contribution rather than competition for your recognition. The most challenging aspect of legacy thinking is making decisions that benefit the future even when they create short-term costs or complications. Establishing merit-based promotion systems threatened existing power structures, but created more capable long-term leadership. Implementing uniform legal codes disrupted local traditions but provided consistent justice for future generations. Legacy consciousness also requires systematic attention to how your methods and principles will be transmitted to others. It's not enough to achieve great things. You must make your approach learnable and transferable. This demands the discipline of reflection, documentation, and teaching, even when these activities distract from immediate action. I learned that true legacy lies not in being remembered for what you accomplished, but in making possible accomplishments. That would never have occurred without your contribution. The student who surpasses your achievements because of principles you taught them creates more lasting legacy than monuments erected to your memory. This perspective transforms failure and setbacks as well. Instead of viewing them as personal defeats, You begin seeing them as lessons that can prevent others from making similar mistakes. Even my ultimate military defeat provided insights about overextension, coalition management, and strategic patience that future leaders could apply more successfully. The legacy mindset ultimately asks whether the world is better because you lived in it, not just whether you achieved your personal ambitions within it. The tools of empire have changed dramatically since my time. Artillery has given way to algorithms, cavalry charges to corporate strategies, diplomatic treaties to digital networks, but the fundamental principles of disciplined ambition remain as relevant today as they were when I conquered Europe. The ambitious individual in your modern world faces the same essential challenge I faced: how to transform grand visions into systematic achievement. Your contemporary world actually amplifies both the opportunities and the obstacles that ambitious people encounter. Technology provides unprecedented access to knowledge, markets, and collaboration, but it also creates infinite distractions and scattered attention that make systematic focus more difficult than ever. The same forces that can accelerate your progress can derail it if you lack the disciplines necessary to harness them effectively. Consider how my artillery method applies to modern career advancement. Just as I studied every battlefield on Italian soil before launching my campaigns there, the modern ambitious person must systematically master their chosen field before expecting to transform it. But today, this means navigating information abundance rather than information scarcity. The discipline becomes learning to ignore the vast majority of available content to focus on the knowledge that directly advances your strategic objectives. My daily routine as emperor translates directly to modern executive effectiveness. The executive who cannot control their morning schedule, who allows email and meetings to dictate their priorities, who reacts to urgent demands rather than systematically advancing important objectives, will find themselves managing everyone else's agenda rather than building their own empire. The principle of decisive action becomes even more critical in environments where opportunities appear and disappear rapidly. But the fundamental insight remains unchanged: systematic preparation combined with bold execution when timing aligns. The entrepreneur who prepares thoroughly for market entry but never launches their product accomplishes nothing. The professional who acts without systematic preparation wastes opportunities that may not recur. My approach to focused concentration provides essential guidance for modern achievement in environments designed to fragment attention. Every notification, social media platform, and communication channel demands immediate response, creating the illusion of productivity while preventing the sustained focus that meaningful achievement requires. The discipline of protecting your attention becomes more valuable than any specific skill or knowledge. The compound growth strategies I used to build imperial power apply perfectly to modern career and business development. The professional who reads systematically in their field for 1 hour daily will accumulate expertise that compounds into significant competitive advantage. The entrepreneur who improves their business systems incrementally but consistently will achieve breakthrough results that appear sudden to external observers, but were inevitable results of systematic progress. Energy and attention management becomes more complex but more critical in modern environments. Your ancestors faced physical demands that modern life has largely eliminated, but mental and emotional demands have intensified dramatically. The disciplines of systematic rest, focused work periods, and strategic energy allocation determine whether you thrive in information-intensive environments or become another casualty of digital overwhelm. Strategic patience applies especially to modern career development and business building. The pressure for immediate results, instant recognition, and rapid scaling conflicts with the systematic approach that creates lasting achievement. Social media amplifies this pressure by providing constant exposure to others' apparent overnight success, while hiding the years of systematic preparation that made such success possible. building powerful inner circles becomes both easier and more challenging. In networked environments, technology enables connection with like-minded individuals regardless of geographical constraints, but it also creates superficial networking that lacks the mutual investment and genuine relationship development that characterizes truly powerful alliances. The systematic learning disciplines I maintain throughout my career become even more essential when knowledge evolves rapidly and new fields emerge constantly. But the fundamental approach remains unchanged: structured exposure to different perspectives, systematic reflection on experience, and organized frameworks for applying new insights to practical challenges, creating lasting systems and thinking. About legacy may be the most important modern applications of imperial thinking. The technology that enables rapid individual achievement also enables systematic impact that can benefit millions of people permanently. The ambitious individual who thinks systematically about sustainable contribution can create value that compounds across global networks rather than being limited to local influence. Now you possess the same principles that carried me from obscure Corsican origins to master of Europe. The question that remains is not whether these disciplines work. History has proven their power beyond doubt. The question is whether you will apply them with the systematic consistency that transforms ambitious dreams into achieved reality. Begin this sharing by addressing your frustration with grand ambitions that never translate into concrete achievement. Now you understand that this gap between vision and execution closes not through inspiration or motivation, but through the disciplined application of systematic principles that work regardless of your emotional state, external circumstances, or temporary setbacks. Your personal empire may not involve conquering nations, but it requires the same fundamental disciplines that built every lasting achievement in human history. Whether you're building a business, advancing a career, creating art, or serving a cause, the pathway from ambition to accomplishment follows identical principles across all domains and eras. The morning routine that governed my days as emperor can govern yours as an ambitious individual seeking to control your own destiny. The systematic learning that built my strategic expertise can build whatever knowledge foundation your objectives require. The focused concentration that won battles can win whatever competitive challenges you face in your chosen field. But remember this crucial truth: discipline is not restriction, it is liberation. The systematic habits that may feel limiting in the beginning become the foundation for achievements that would be impossible through undisciplined effort. The ambitious person who masters these disciplines gains access to levels of capability and impact that remain forever beyond the reach of those who rely on talent, luck, or sporadic effort alone. Your moment of decisive action is now, not when conditions become perfect, not when you feel completely prepared, not when external circumstances align ideally. The same principle that guided my seizure of power in France applies to your seizure of control over your own potential. Systematic preparation, combined with bold execution when opportunity presents itself. I challenge you to begin immediately with the smallest systematic discipline that supports your largest ambition. Choose one daily habit that compounds toward your most important objective. Implement one systematic improvement that moves you closer to your ultimate vision. Create one routine that converts scattered effort into focused progress. The world needs what your disciplined ambition can create. History proves that individuals who master these timeless principles influence far beyond their immediate circumstances. Your personal empire, whatever form it takes, can benefit people you will never meet in ways you cannot currently imagine. But this influence flows only through sustained application of the disciplines I have shared. Reading about these principles changes nothing. Understanding them intellectually accomplishes nothing. Only systematic implementation transforms ambitious potential into achieved reality. Your empire awaits your commitment to the systematic disciplines that build all lasting achievement. The throne of your own potential sits vacant until you prove worthy of occupying it through consistent application of these imperial principles. Begin today. Begin systematically. Begin with the confidence that these disciplines have never failed. Anyone who applied them with genuine consistency, the future remembers those who transform ambitious dreams into systematic achievement. Make yourself worthy of such remembrance. Your destiny depends not on luck, timing, or talent. It depends on your willingness to embrace the systematic disciplines that separate achievers from dreamers in every generation. The choice is yours. The principles are proven. Your personal empire awaits.